I'm going to get to 90 degrees Fahrenheit here in a couple minutes. Now I'm looking out the window. It's still dark outside. The sun, the eastern horizon hasn't started to kind of glow a little bit, which is kind of a cool time of the morning to get out and watch the sun come up. I haven't watched the sun come up in a long time. Well, I'll get to that just another time. Now, the time that I really love is in the summertime when it's hot. I spent the day working, and then the sun goes down, and then there's that glow on the western horizon. As I want the sun goes down, kind of that. Not twilight. There's a name for that. I don't remember quite what it is, but that's the time of day I really love. Just the evening when that's the time of the evening when the sky was even. It actually means something that a lot of people don't really realize, but that's the meaning of the word evening. With evening, I'll find that out and I'll get back to you on that one. But it makes me ponder what petty and senseless discussion that Bunny, or YouTube channel is Bunny and Beyond Van Life, what petty and senseless discussion she might engage in with law enforcement officers. She's down in Mexico, so she'd have to find a discussion with Federale or with the local police. Now, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true or not. Now that, let's say you get a DWI and you have a choice of either paying the fine, spending time in jail, or they would let you work it off by being a police officer. I don't know if that's true or not. That makes me kind of wonder the quality of their officers. Um, you definitely want to watch yourself if you're going into you want to be, you don't want to go down and act stupid. You want to hang on. You want to be responsible. The main thing you want to do is learn at least enough Spanish so you can kind of got a hair or fuzz or something. But anyway, you want to know at least a little bit of Spanish so you can kind of converse with people down. If you don't, if you go down there and expect everybody to speak English, you're kind of stupid. Well, also that Spanish is like the third most commonly spoken language in the world. By number of first language speakers, Mandarin Chinese has the greatest number of first language speakers. Now, a lot of people like English. By first language speakers, English is second. But if you realize that English is a world lingua franca, a lot of people that grow up speaking one language will learn English as a second language just so they can. I'm not saying that to because that English is my mother tongue. That's what I grew up speaking. But it's just as the language a lot of people learn as a second language to communicate with each other. That's just a fact. I'm not saying English is any better than any other language, but it's just the one that a lot of people learn just so they can communicate is a second language. A lot of people, well, it's like 2 billion people worldwide speak English, either as a first language or second language. But anyway, yeah, Spanish is like number 3, just because the Spanish were back in the days when the various nations were colonizing. They were getting out in their ships and colonizing different parts of the world. The Spanish were really good at it. They settled quite a big chunk of present day Latin America. Oh well, parts of Africa. There are parts of Africa that there's some nations in Africa that speak French. Of course, there's quite a bit of French. French is down the down the list a little ways, but French is well. One thing I found, if you learn one language, you're going to pick up words that you recognize that have the same or similar meaning. You got to be careful with that. I'm going to get to that in a second too. But you find that there are words. Well, the one word doesn't mean anything in English, but it's like biblioteca. It's library. Well, biblioteca is library in Spanish. Bibliotech is library in French and in German. So there's words that you can recognize in other languages once you start getting into them. I'm not saying you can master a language that way, but there's a lot of words in German that are close enough to English that you can kind of recognize them. And there's another one. I talked to a Polish lady, and she said, well, bibliotech is a library in Polish also. So that's one or two words I picked up in Polish. I don't know why I was digressing in languages, but it's if you're going to go down to Mexico, yeah, you definitely want to learn a little bit of Spanish so that you kind of communicate with people down there. If you can't talk to the local people, what's the point in going to a country if you're not gonna learn a little bit of their language? That's why I said to Bunny, I don't know how much Spanish Bunny speaks. Maybe she's fluent in Spanish. I think if she were, she would have used a few words of Spanish in her into some of her videos, but she hasn't. But anyway, well, I grew up here, and I was born in Phoenix. I grew up here. When I went to school, it was you'd hear there's a few kids that would speak Spanish. A lot of the Hispanic kids didn't learn Spanish. They just spoke English. It's kind of a loss to me, that they wouldn't. I've known 2 or 3 ladies that same age as me that I went to school with, that they didn't learn Spanish from their parents, but they would marry somebody and end up learning Spanish from their spouse. Just kind of interesting. Let me go back to my list. Oh yeah, Jesse's Drone Adventures, his latest video. Now I knew these places were there. Now Jesse's Drone Adventures, so he couldn't actually use a drone in his latest video because he went to City of Phoenix Park. They've passed laws where you can't use drones in these parks, but this is a driving trail through South Mountain. Now I knew these were there. I've never been through there. In fact, I think I'd visited South Mountain Park years ago. I don't remember much about it, but there's a number of these places. I need to get up there and then post these videos to, to my YouTube channel. Well, I live in Avondale, but I was born in the city of Phoenix, so I definitely need to get some of these drive-through trails and hiking trails and stuff. And if some chick is really into hiking some of these mountains, hey, let me know. Let me know that if you'd be interested in having me go with you just as a backup. I'm gonna get to that in a second here too. But Jesse's latest video was from one of these, the South Mountain Park down there. It's some very cool. There was one structure. It's just the walls now. The rest of the structure is gone. He said it was open in 1975, and Jesse said he wished he had been here in 75 to go in there and have a beer. Now, I was 18 in 1975. I don't think I knew about this bar being open down there. But I didn't turn 19 until 76. Now, if the place were still open in 1976, now 19 was the legal drinking age in Arizona. I could, if the place was still open in 1976 when I turned 19, I could have gone in there and had a beer. Just weird thoughts. I didn't really start drinking until I was in my mid 20s. So I moved in with this chick, and she got me to drinking alcohol. Anyway, that's Jesse's latest drone adventures from South Mountain Park. There's a bunch of parks in there that sometime I need to get parks and hiking trails and stuff, and sometime I need to cover those just because I am a native Phoenician. Phoenician is a proper, it's a Phoenix bird. Now, back in the mid 1800s, when people started settling what we call the Valley of the Sun, the Phoenix metro area, you saw these canals, what had been, farms. The people that had lived here earlier had abandoned them years ago, but they saw where people had lived here, past civilizations. The phoenix, the phoenix is a bird. The Greek, I think it was Greek, the legend, but the bird would destroy itself, and would build a fire, destroy itself in a fire, and arise from its ashes to become bigger and better. That's the idea of why they call it Phoenix. The city would arise from the ashes of once civilization to become bigger and better, more improved, stuff like that. That's the idea behind the Phoenix. If you ever see the symbol, you will see a bird with flames around it. I don't know how many people get that, but that's where the idea comes from. The Phoenix bird arising from its funeral pyre to become bigger and better. Just including that there. Let's see. Let me show you. Let me get to the Pleasant Valley Wars. Now, I've downloaded a handful of videos. The videos are here on YouTube. If you search Pleasant Valley Wars, these will come up. There's a half a dozen or so videos that will come up kind of explaining the history behind the Pleasant Valley War. A number of people have written books about it. I don't think any major movie has been actually made about the Pleasant Valley War. And it's one of those stories. Hey, some movie producer, pick up a story, run with it. Because I'm sure that, it's up there. There's been about a dozen movies made about Tombstone. And it's 1881. This is around the same time frame back in the late 1880s when the West was kind of being settled. But like I said, it's an estimated 50 people were killed. I guess mostly guys. I don't think too many women because this is a blood feud among men. Basically, two families, but there's a couple of other families that got tied up into it. These families started as friendly. They knew each other. They were friends until one they were cattle ranchers, cattle rustlers. That was kind of the thing to if you saw somebody with a lot more cattle. Well, they let the cattle run free on the big plains. That was cheaper than to try to fence them in and stuff. I guess eventually later they figured they were losing too many cattle. They started fencing them in, kind of trying to control them. But they would these were branded cattle, but they'd take a brand and they'd kind of modify it a little bit to make it look like their own brand. That was very very popular. But the two families were rustling cows, and one turned the other one into law enforcement, and then it's a long story. And if you want to get the story, I'll get some of the more bitter details of the story and post them here when I've got. I don't think they're hard facts. I think they're some of it somewhat hard facts, and some of it, because there are court decisions where people were convicted of stuff, and there were other court decisions where there just no witnesses, like different murders, or maybe the witnesses were friends of the. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, they were. It's wild stories. I think you kind of see where I'm going with it, and I'll get the facts of the Pleasant Valley Wars. But I don't get why somebody hasn't made a major motion picture, or maybe it doesn't make motion pictures. Considering the it's up there with some of the other Wild West stories. You could make a number of movies about it. I don't know why somebody hasn't, or maybe somebody has, and they just never become very prominent films. I don't know. Now, there's a lot of people that believe, that are familiar with the Pleasant Valley Wars, that believe Arizona didn't become a state, for 30 or 40 years after a lot of other states. Because Arizona didn't become a state; it was a territory until 1912. Now, if you look at some of the old maps, Arizona and New Mexico were together as one territory, and they divided. They divided the two states. New Mexico was number 47, and Arizona was number 48. There's people that will refer to Arizona as State 48 just because it has a nice rhyme to it. And I'll periodically use the same thing. I'll say, I live here in State 48 just because it's got a nice rhyme to it. But if some major motion picture producer wants to make a movie about the Pleasant Valley Wars, I'm sure that some of the major that are into westerns. You got to be into westerns. You got to make it as a proper western. That's what it would be. But it was cattle rustling. There was blood feuds. I'm sure there's a bunch of them on the Hatfield and the McCoys, and there's been a bunch of them on the shootout at the OK Corral. This is up there with the shootout at the OK Corral. I mean, this is totally unrelated. Let me show you this power transformer. Yeah, if I can, it was I need to check it, but it's probably good because it looks good. Now this was in a piece of junk equipment. There was a place I was checking, or doing some work for yesterday, and this was sitting in a piece of equipment. They were just tossing it out. This place will leave. I've gotten a lot of scrap metal, from this place. So I'll just put stuff out there that they're tossing, and I'll pick it up. And I've done that since I was a kid. Just pick up scrap metal, make a few bucks out of it. There's a big business in scrap metal if you're into that type of thing, in recycling metal. A lot of people just toss their scrap in the trash. Well, let me get back to this transformer. Even though it's in a piece of junk equipment they've torn up, I can take and make a power supply for something with this. It's like 240 to 24 volts. One thing I found, if you take a 240 volt transformer and put 120 volts on the primary, you can get like 12 volts off of the secondary. That's a real common. There's a lot of stuff wired to work on 12 volts DC. So you can make all you need to do is add a bridge rectifier, some filter capacitors, maybe a voltage regulator, and you got a perfect 12 volt power supply. Not for free. Well, the transformer is for free. This is a big one. I don't know. I think it's like 25 volt amps. Oh, it's bigger than that. But anyway, big. I've got 2 or 3 like this. I've robbed out of equipment. I've taken some and made power supplies out of them. You got to have a little bit of electronic knowledge to do that. But if you got a little bit of electronic knowledge, that's pretty simple. But anyway, I've been doing that stuff like that as a kid. Let me go back to my list. Pleasant Valley Wars, Transformer, Bunny, Jesse's Drone Adventures. Yeah, Jesse's Drone Adventures, man, that's one guy that I like to team with sometime. If he wants somebody to watch his back, go with him to hike someplace. Jesse can let me know. Now let me get to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, they didn't quite get it to, I don't know what that is in Celsius for my people that only speak Celsius. I don't know, what's that, about 40 degrees Celsius? Something like that. I'll look it up and I'll post it later. But anyway, it's supposed to get to the next day or two, it's supposed to get 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is actually not all that hot. I remember a number of years ago, I was doing some work. This is a little bar, I was doing something in there. Anyway, this one guy was saying at the bar, he was like it is now, it was like around 88, 90, something like that. This guy was going, it's effing hot, it's effing hot. I didn't say anything. And I could tell the guy, I said, well, look, this is nothing. Stay here for the summertime when when it really gets hot. But I just left him alone. Said I'm guessing he's probably from a cooler climate. I don't know if he's just here visiting. I didn't really ask him. He just a bar patron. What I do, I work in a little reach in behind the counter or something like that. But there's a number of places that I got a job I'm going to do this morning. I'm going to call them and see if they've if this guy's got a part. I'll go do the job. Otherwise, I'll probably hit up Walmart. I may walk down to or drive down to Monument Hill because I wanted to get down there and focus on Phoenix International Raceway because they're going to have a NASCAR race down there. Oh, it's I think early March. They're going to have a NASCAR race at Phoenix International Raceway. Just want to get the track, once again before they have that NASCAR race. I just climb up Monument Hill. That's where if you missed my other video on Monument Hill, that's when they call it Monument Hill. That's where they have that brass plaque up there. It's the land surveyors picked a spot, back in the mid 1800s, where it's a center for the land management here in the state of Arizona. Not all land management comes from that, but most of it is. The north-south line is 115th Avenue. The east-west line runs into Baseline Road. If you've ever been on Baseline Road and not known the significance of it, that's how Baseline Road got its name. It's the base line for the east-west, the townships, how they went to townships here in Arizona. You're either north and west or east. You're a direction from that cardinal point. That's how Monument Hill got its name. Let's see. I think I've covered everything here. If some chick wants to teach me how to speak Celsius, hey, let me know. I'll sit down. You can whisper sweet nothings in Celsius to me. Or not. And for Bunny, hey, be careful with the federales you're getting discussion with. Hey, be pleasant, friendly with the federales. I'm just teasing you, chick. Hey, love all of yous. Das Leben ist ein Abenteuer. C'est la vie, and ciao. Vaya con Dios. Bye.